to celebrate and acknowledge International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia and Biphobia. I am really pleased to pass the mic to Alun, who is the chair of the LGBT plus staff network, and also acknowledge the presence of Professor Martin Boddy, who is our UWE Bristol Pro-Vice Chancellor of Research and Enterprise. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I will very swiftly pass to Alun, who will look after you for within the next hour of today's talk.
Well, welcome everybody. As Louise mentioned, my name is Alun. I'm the chairman of the LGBT plus network at UWE. If we'd like to start, and we'll go around, get everyone to introduce themselves, give a name, their role, their LGBT plus identity, and also what does allyship mean to you as a LGBT plus person or ally? So if you wouldn't mind, if I can start with you, Martin, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi everybody. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me. I'm Martin Boddy. I'm Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research and Enterprise here at the university, but also a member of the VC Directorate. So I'm sat here in the VC's office. My identity is straight. I'm a white, older, male, senior leader in the university. Is that okay for now?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you very much, Martin. There we are. If I could move on to Suzanne next.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Suzanne Carrie. I'm Deputy Director of LCI, responsibility for equality, diversity and inclusivity, which basically means I lead those areas of work in the university. Very long job title. My pronouns are her, she, her, and I'm a lesbian.
Wonderful, thank you. If I could ask you the same question as well to Anna.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Ana Miguel. I work for the Equality, Diversity and Inclusivity team, and I'm the Inclusive Practice Officer, and I've been leading the Speak Up campaign. My pronouns are she, her. I'm straight, and I'm here as an ally.
Thank you. And the same question to you, Lee.
Hello everybody, yeah, I'm Lee. My pronouns are he, him. I identify as a queer transgender man, and my role is and it's quite a long one, it's a transgender support working group content creator.
Wonderful, thank you. And finally, to Laura as well, if that's okay.
Thank you so much. Hi, so my name is Laura. My pronouns are she and they. I identify as a bisexual woman, and I have a number of different roles currently working in policy and also student volunteering while studying and doing some campaigning as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I will pass back to Martin. In my excitement, I forgot to let him introduce himself as the executive welcome. So if you wouldn't mind, I'll just pass back to you, Martin.
No, that's fine. I know, and it's an exciting event. Thank you ever so much for inviting me here for the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, Biphobia. It's great to see you all here. As I said in my introduction, as a straight white male, older sort of male service senior leader, I haven't got a lot going for me in terms of diversity credentials, but I think I was just asked to say a little bit about why being an ally was important to me, and also a little bit about UWE's values, all in less than 5 minutes. And I think that, well, my description of myself is exactly why I think people like myself should be an ally. We shouldn't be assuming that, well, either that, and apologies if I use the wrong language, I'm sure I get things wrong, but for shorthand, I'm not sure why gay colleagues should necessarily be expected to do the work of making the university a safe, welcoming and exciting place for people with different sexualities. I think key aim and overall aim, and I'd say this from sitting in the University Directorate, is that our aim is to create a workplace that is friendly to all LGBT plus colleagues, to allow them to be themselves, to be out at work if they want to. Obviously, there's no implication that people should be out at work, and those who aren't out should nevertheless also feel safe and welcomed and comfortable in themselves being at work. Diversity, inclusivity is at the heart of UWE's professed values. It's up there along with being ambitious, innovative, collaborative, and enterprising. We all have those words tattooed on our forearms in the Directorate, and just in case we forget, but inclusivity is really there at the heart. You'll know that we've recently appointed a Deputy Vice Chancellor, Paul Olomile, to lead on equalities, diversity and inclusion. He's probably listening to me at the moment because he's in the next room. And that's great. It's a really positive signal from the university. But again, we shouldn't assume that just because we have a single senior colleague labelled DVC4 ... that they have to do that work. Nor when people look at Paul should we assume that he will lead on BAME issues only. I mean, that is part of his portfolio. But again, we shouldn't make assumptions just because of somebody's individual characteristics or sexuality that they lead on anything in particular. Why is it important for the university? Why is it important for us as a directorate? Just before I came on the call, I had a quick look at the results of our last staff survey, and the kind of the headline for us at least is that LGBT plus UWE staff had the lowest positive responses in general to the UWE staff survey. I won't throw lots of stats at you, but just that in itself is worrying and concerning, and I think it's reinforced by some of the stats that Stonewall produces. I had a quick look at these as well, just to remind myself. And according to Stonewall, over a third of LGBT plus staff have hidden their sexual orientation because of fears of discrimination at work. And that 20%, my last statistic promised, 20% have experienced negative comments or conduct at work. So why is it important? Because there are serious issues, and whatever our professed values as a university, there's clearly work to be done. So that's why I personally am an ally. I'm new to calling myself overtly an ally, although like many white liberals, I'd say I'd been relatively non-discriminatory and open and supportive my whole life from when I was at university many moons ago. It was quite interesting, actually. I was thinking I was at university, believe it or not, in the early 70s, and just looking at what, how recently some of the gains were made in relation to equalities in relation to sexuality. You'll know them all, but I just look back and think, Christ, that was all happening 2 or 3 years before I was a student, or some of it was happening. That the first Gay Liberation Front march, I think, was 1970, just after the Stonewall riots. That was only a couple of years before I went to university. So I hadn't realised at the time. I lived quite a charmed life at university, where people were completely openly within the university context, at least, open about their sexuality, and households I lived in were mixed, and many friends had varying backgrounds or sexualities, but just how, in a sense, just how recent it was. Well, for someone as old as me, it seems recent anyway. So what do I think is important personally as an ally? I think to listen and to learn, and that's what I'm going to shut up in a minute and do just that for the rest of this. I think obviously to challenge where we can, whether it's overt harassment or whether it's just day-to-day homophobia, transphobia, biphobia in jokes or people's remarks or comments or whatever, which I encounter not much around the university, but certainly I have rather mixed groups of friends, and quite often find myself challenging some of my more unreconstructed friends in a sort of friendly way, but a firm way. So they kind of know where I stand on these issues, and it can get uncomfortable at times. I think as well it's important to get some of the, as a senior leader, to get the policies and processes right, like Speak Up. And I'm just conscious it's a crowded space with Me Too, with Black Lives Matters, with everyone invited. It's really important that all voices are heard, and also to remember that they're not mutually exclusive. These categories that people put, or the different campaigns that come up from slightly separate places. I'm sure I get it wrong. I'm sure I will get it wrong. I'm sure I'll be embarrassed in the future, as I have been in the past. But I'll keep on trying. And in the interests of time and learning and listening, I'll end it there, Alan. Probably I went just over my 5 minutes. Apologies, but
That's right.
really good to see you all, and really looking forward to the rest of the event. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Martin. So I thought we'd start off with a very nice, simple, easy question for everyone to ease everyone in. So what does allyship mean within the LGBT plus community? I thought I'd start with you, Laura, if that was okay.
Of course, thank you. So to me, allyship means two things, specifically around bisexuality. The first is recognizing the lived experiences and the intersectionality of the lived experiences of bisexual people, and specifically bisexual women, which includes issues around racism, sexism, ableism, things around domestic violence and sexual violence as well, and making an informed effort to be educated about the reality of these experiences. And then the second definition, I would say, is around allyship in the LGBT plus community, is making a concerted effort to throw away the kind of implicit requirement for people to perform their queerness in order to feel valid in the community as well, which I think is a very big feeling, especially in the bisexual community, where we are excluded sort of from the queer community and the LGBT plus community in ways, and the non-queer communities as well. So that's me.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a great answer. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to that in terms of what allyship means to them?
I'll go ahead if everyone's happy. I'm very much in agreement with Laura. Basically, word for word what you said, spot on. I would also add in that it's recognising within that intersectionality as well, there's certain privileges or layers of privilege that we have too, and knowing where those intersections come in, and how, as an ally to anyone, you don't speak for that person or that group, you help them make their voice louder. I always imagine as it being a case of you coming from the side, give them an apple box to stand on, hand them a microphone, and are there to support them and work as a line of defence should anyone try to target them as well. So it's going in there and being willing to help further educate, and also educate yourself as well, and it not all be on that person to educate you, knowing that there are resources out there already that someone will have put out there to help you be more informed and learn, and then you share that as you feel necessary, and that may well lead to uncomfortable and challenging conversations. But that doesn't need to be a bad thing. And I think with education, especially going on further, there needs to be that kind of challenge to everything to progress forward.
No, that's great. Thank you very much, Lee. In the interest of time, I'll move on to the next question, unless anyone's got anything burning they'd like to say. So I might ask the next question to you, Suzanne, to start with. So how have you gone about to challenge inappropriate language, comments, microaggressions, or harassment against an LGBT plus person community, and being an active bystander?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I think it can be really difficult sometimes to challenge in the moment. But I can think of a good example when I was earlier on in my career, where I wasn't working at UWE, I was working somewhere else, just to say, and I was interviewing candidates for a temporary role And a much more senior person, so the people we were interviewing were students, and when one of the students left the room, a much more senior person sort of made a comment that they thought that person was gay. It wasn't, it was hard to put my finger on. It wasn't exactly disparaging. However, I wasn't out at work at the time, and it didn't feel like a place where I felt able to be out. And although it wasn't entirely disparaging, there was just a feeling that there was a bit of judgment there, and there was an element of it being, was certainly inappropriate to comment on, but also that there was some judgment coming in to some extent. And it can be really difficult to challenge when you're challenging about something that is also connected to your identity if you're not out. Because it suddenly feels like you've got this massive neon sign above your head going, hello, I'm the thing that I'm now challenging you about. But I just couldn't sit there and not say anything. So I said, I don't think it's appropriate. I don't see what that's got to do with interviewing this candidate, actually. And the person was so embarrassed, and it started trying to sort of back step and being like, oh no, I wasn't trying to say anything bad, and it was quite hard just to kind of hold that moment and just be like, I'm not gonna make this okay, actually. I'm just gonna leave it because you did something that wasn't really okay. It wasn't the worst bit of homophobia I've ever seen, but it wasn't okay in the workplace. And they never did it again, actually, after that. So it obviously had an impact. But yeah, that's probably my example.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Suzanne. Could I ask you the same question as well, Anna, because I know you're involved with the Speak Up campaign.
Yes, sure. So yes, I've been working in the Speak Up campaign since 2017, and the Speak Up campaign is like to create an inclusive university. Can you hear me? I think I've been frozen. Sorry. That everyone feel safe, and we can challenge inappropriate behavior. One example that I have about this, it was working with students. With myself and one colleague, one academic colleague, we were training sport clubs and societies and how to be an active bystander, so how to challenge inappropriate comments or behaviors. And one of the examples, I think it was something around like if you and your friends, because we gave like case studies. So we say, you and your friends wants to go for a night out, and one of your friends, they don't want to go out. And one of the groups say like, that is so gay. So using that term to make a student to think how you will act in that situation, what would you say? And some of the students, they will challenge that. They will challenge, first of all, not to put pressure in someone who has taken a decision, and then the language. But other students, they were saying something that they used. And it was a really good moment to guide some students to challenge other, how to use the language, how that language can be completely inappropriate. And you shouldn't use that at all. So yeah, that I think that is one of the examples of how to challenge. And what Suzanne said, like sometimes it could feel like uncomfortable, or you don't know how to challenge. And I want to say that it's also okay. It's okay in the moment you cannot challenge because you know how. You need to think in your personal safety, and also you can act after. You can report it. You can delegate. You can change the conversation. So there are many ways that you can be an active bystander. It's not only challenging the moment.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you both for those answers. We'll move on to the next question, if that's okay. And I might start with you, Lee, because I know you mentioned that you had an example for this one. So the next question is, in a world full of good intentions, have you come across any schemes that have promoted allyship that delivered the wrong outcome, and what would you have changed?
Yes, so in my case, it's been working with a company whose external values haven't necessarily appeared to align internally as well. And I think that's very much key. I think it was something that, Martin mentioned earlier about always being transparent too about what values you have within your company, within your corporation, within your charity, wherever it be, and being truthful to those. And it's something that I know is in the process of changing. I'm personally helping to work on that change, and it's something that when things go wrong, you need to be able to hold your hands up and say, this has happened. We are sorry about that. Here's how we're going forward and the steps that we're taking to make those changes. And I think that's really, really important to recognise that people are fallible and things do happen, but to not make it all about you as well. With Suzanne mentioning earlier about when you feel the need to call someone out and then they get their words all jumbled up and they feel wholeheartedly embarrassed. That is obviously, I feel for that person because they don't mean to do any harm, but it makes it so much worse the person that you have unnecessarily harmed as well, by then fumbling and digging yourself further into the hole and not just going, okay, let's stop this now, I'll learn, I'll move on, I am sorry, and go from there. So yes, I think that's very much a thing that I've encountered, and I think transparency and being able to apologise well is at the heart of that. And the other thing that I've noticed is many corporations worry when it comes to anything to do with intersectionality or especially anything LGBT+, that their support will be seen as jumping on a bandwagon. That's not the case. The sooner you can get involved, the better. And if anyone does come to you with that critique, well, fine, because as long as you're doing what's right and you're supporting people in a fair and just way, then why does anyone's negative critique matter? Especially not to businesses that are there to make money.
No, that's wonderful, thank you. Has anybody else got any experiences of schemes that maybe haven't worked how they should have?
I would just add on to what Lee has said, just expanding on the rainbow capitalism argument. I think a lot of the time when that happens, I also notice that when companies and businesses say LGBT+, they tend to really mean and only attract cis gay white men. They don't actually mean they want the whole plethora of identities and different communities that are involved in that, just as Lee said, around shying away from intersectionality. So it's really, when I was looking at this question, it's really difficult to pinpoint anything, even just in terms of bisexuality, any kind of schemes that have been deliberately for that community, because generally it's just kind of lumped into one acronym that tends to attract the same type of person.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Thank you all for that. Moving on to the next question, obviously Martin touched upon it briefly earlier, is language. Obviously to a straight person, the fear of saying the wrong thing or upsetting someone must be quite strange and quite a daunting challenge. Excuse me, sorry. So what would be the one piece of advice you would give someone who feels cautious about getting it wrong, or for example, like the use of word queer or any other LGBT+ specific words? Can I pass the question to Anna to start with?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would say, first of all, as Lee said before, educate yourself. So educate yourself about what are the right terms to use, educate yourself and start reading, watching videos, talk to people, recognize your own privilege that you have around that. And also I will say, once you have realized that you have started to do the work and you have started to work on yourself, reading and engaging, then try having conversations and talk and be like, maybe you get it right, or maybe you say something that for some people is right, another is not, because sometimes it's complex, and it is okay to feel like that. So I will say, not try just always to get it right. I think intentions here and that you are doing the work and trying is important.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Anna. What about you, Suzanne? Do you have any other thoughts or reflections on that?
Yeah, I think there's when this conversation comes up about people getting the language wrong, I always think how common it is actually, and what a common experience it is. Partly because language is fluid and what's right, as Anna was saying, what's right for one person isn't right for someone else, and also because people get really nervous about it and end up, the more nervous they get, the more likely they are to say the wrong thing and all the rest of it. And how common an experience it is that someone that if you are LGBT, that you get it, that you experience people saying things that aren't quite right at some point. And so therefore, I think that kind of has reflections, I suppose, for me on everyone. So I think if you're the person saying something, I think people from LGBT communities can also get it wrong. It doesn't, it's not like we've got some dictionary and then we get it right and we just haven't given you the book yet. So, if you say something and you get it wrong, then try to not worry about it, because you're probably not the only person that's ever got that wrong. Try and just move on. It's not the end of the world. And I think if someone says something and it's wrong to you, then to recognise that part of your reaction to that individual person is probably like the kind of culmination of perhaps lots of little bits of frustration, and to kind of reflect on that for yourself, that it's probably not the person standing in front of you. They're not always the cause of the level of frustration that you're feeling. They're like the final straw that broke the camel's back sometimes. So I think try enough curiosity about the intention that the person was bringing to the conversation where you can, and try not to focus on the mistake too much. Try not to dwell on it, I guess, because it affects you as much as it affects the other person. But that's maybe a little bit of a controversial perspective, but yeah, that's what I think.
Oh, that's great, thank you. Would anybody else like to add anything onto that?
I could jump in again if that's cool.
Yes, totally fine.
I just find language incredibly interesting, so I love this question. But I think the beautiful thing about language is that we have so many new descriptors to identify ourselves with and feel like we are part of something and we understand what's going on. But I think what could be really useful is for people to educate themselves about the social political history of where these terms have come from, how they've evolved, and the different connotations or meanings they might have attached to them. So just as an example, for people who are outside of the LGBT plus community, I will always call myself bisexual, because that is a political stance of me saying I am queer, but I am specifically bisexual, and I don't want to be lumped with other different communities because they have their own terms and their own histories and their own kind of politics within them. But to people within the LGBT plus community, I will call myself queer because I feel like I am still part of that community. Depending on different experiences, I'll go back to bisexual because I feel like I need to reiterate the previous point. But I think language is just a really beautiful thing, and educating yourself about the socio-political history is a really, really useful way of understanding why.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much, Laura. Yeah, well, move on to the next question then. I'm probably going to direct this at you, Lee, if that's okay. So what can organisations do to make LGBT plus staff and students feel seen, valued and celebrated?
I would wholeheartedly say events like this and marking days within the calendar and not shying away from that. Yes, there are an awful lot of days in the calendar for any minority group, and I'm not just thinking about anyone who's LGBT plus in this as well, but those should be celebrated and marked in any way possible. And that's been easily seen by hosting events like this. I know there's a lot more workings that go on in the background too to these, which I'm very, very grateful for. But also with COVID, we've seen an awful lot of, even just social media and just doing it, just one post to make someone realise that they've been seen and are going to be listened to as well is very, very important. In an education setting, it's again challenging the curriculum, looking at what's missing, making sure that people are represented. There we go, there's the word, as well within there. But also ensuring that none of these gestures are just token gestures. If you are going to talk about a specific person or group or day or event, ensure that there is follow-up there as well. If someone has questions about it, that someone's behind all of that in order to talk to them or direct them to another source instead.
That's great, thank you very much. Is there anything else anybody else would like to add to that?
Yeah, can I come in there?
Yeah, go for it.
I think all of that, I completely agree with everything Lee said, but I think it's also about all of the everyday stuff as well. So everyone who's LGBT plus is probably, or everyone anyway, sorry, with, say if they've got a partner that is the same sex or a gender identity that isn't the opposite of their identity. I bet everyone has had the experience of trying to book a table or book a hotel room or anything like that, and that automatic question, or trying to, you know, phone a doctor and getting that automatic assumption that your partner must be your husband or whatever. And it is boring in the extreme to have to constantly reinforce every time, no, that's not it. And you also have to make this decision about, are you going to or are you not going to? And if you don't, are you then going to end up in some very complicated lie that you've built up where you sort of invented a husband or something like this? And if organisations could just use gender neutral language consistently, then everyone feels seen. Because the effect every time I have to, you know, things have changed a huge amount since I was at school and at university, and that's amazing. But the effect of that history stays with you. So every time you go into, even if things are fine now, and you know, nobody would, I don't experience a lot of you know, direct homophobia when in from organisations on a daily basis, thankfully. And I appreciate that's also because of my my position and my privilege, but I don't. So but you know, every time someone says to me, my husband, or in a hotel room, do you want 2 beds? When I'm trying to book a hotel room with my wife, it makes, there's this feeling in the pit of my stomach that makes me feel not included again, and that has an impact on me. So actually the biggest thing, never mind all the events, they're great, but the biggest thing would just be to do it consistently. That would massively help.
Yeah, that's very true. I think we've all been there with coming out every single day. Oh, thank you for that. So moving on to the next question. I'll put this to you to start with, Anna, if that's okay. Are you?
Yes, sorry. Yes. Did you
Oh,
say
it's
Anna?
fine. I did. Sorry, I'm not asked it yet. I was just checking that I was going to put it to you first.
It was
Sorry,
hard, and I didn't know if it was my name or not.
Sorry, Anna.
Sorry.
So, visible role models are really important in the LGBT plus community. How would you personally or professionally balance visibility versus an individual's safety? And are there any situations where it isn't safe to be visible?
Yeah. So yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think, yeah, like a role model are so important, and it's really important to see that they are like people like you, like in the senior level, in different levels. If you're a student, that they are teacher, that they talk about their if they're LGBT plus. But also I think like everyone, when they are a role model or they talk visibly, they need to feel safe. And there are some places and also like countries at the moment that is not safe to be visible. So I will always say like safety first for everyone, and then also everyone that wants to lead and be a role model, it will help the other generations. It will help everyone to create a more inclusive and diverse community. And also people that, for example, like we are not part of the LGBT plus community, it's also really important to talk about it, and it's really important to be there as an ally and as a listener before listening, just helping and not talking for anyone, just to say I completely support this, and I will challenge any comments that they are not right or behavior.
No, that's great. Thank you. Did anybody else have anything to add to that, of any of their own experiences?
I feel like I'm talking too much, but if anyone else wants
No,
to, absolutely
go for it. What you're here for.
I think for me, the balance of safety and visibility is twofold. So in terms of safety, say for example, I was in an organization or a team that was majority men, I would absolutely not feel comfortable coming out or being visible in my sexuality there, because my experience of discrimination and exclusion is very much tied to me being a bisexual woman. So the misogyny and the sexism that comes alongside that, and the kind of hypersexualization of bisexual women, for example, And so there's a big question of like, how do you signal to other people that you are part of the queer community and that you want to engage in this kind of work and you want to be visible, even implicitly, without having to kind of literally like sort of come out all the time, as you said earlier. And I think, just as an example, I'm really lucky because I'm currently working for an organisation called Student Hubs, and the culture there is just so open and non-judgmental and so curious, and so I feel really able to just be visible without having to kind of say it so exclusively or so explicitly, and that safety element there is so important.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. Brilliant. Oh, sorry, my Teams is having issues. There we go. Brilliant. I'm back. There we are. And the final question to everyone really is that a digital work environment has provided a somewhat safer space for LGBT plus community. Do you think when we start to return to work and come back to campus offices and other places that people might suffer more homophobia, biphobia, transphobia as a result? And what can we do to prevent this? I'm going to pick on Lee to start with. Sorry, Lee.
There's always going to be a risk. That is the very unfortunate thing. I consider myself usually a realist / optimist on that side of things, but obviously there are things you can't ignore. I do think, though, the work that I've done personally or been privy to, when being online, there has been a lot more, and again, it may just be the sector that I've been working in, but everyone has made an effort to kind of introduce themselves in regards to their pronouns and grow an understanding of that. And with having worked online, there seems to have been less boundaries and awkwardness and awkward silences I know people really, like I've said before, really do struggle with. And I hope that can be then continued into the workplace, and that kind of respect. And obviously the internet gives you a certain amount and alignment of boundaries, and I'm hoping that people can have the confidence going forward to keep those boundaries in place. And obviously at the minute we're still trying to keep the 2 meters as it is too, so in general respect as well. But going forward, I think it's just ensuring that within any workplace there are measures in place where none of this will be tolerated, and that these issues can be reported, however uncomfortable, that everybody deserves to feel safe no matter what space they're in, and no matter if that's a colleague who is also a friend and they say the wrong thing, that you can have these fair conversations. That if something is malicious from, say, if you're working even within retail and there's a customer, that also can be dealt with as well, just that you've got the support there. And I'm hoping, like I said, that these measures have become clearer throughout the time we've had away, and people have had time to think and ruminate, and it's just ensuring that those practices continue onwards.
That's great. Thank you very much, Lee. Did anybody else like to weigh in on that? What about you, Laura?
For once, I agree with everything Lee said. I would say it word for word as well.
No, that's fine. Not a problem.
I was thinking that maybe there might be things that have happened in people's lives during this time when they've been kind of in their house and working in their bedrooms potentially, but perhaps if those things had happened when they were in the workplace, their colleagues may have seen it and known, you know, you can kind of, there's an element of sort of emotions can be more hidden, I suppose, when you're online. So like if someone was, say if someone started a new relationship with someone, and that was, you know, with someone of the same gender or a different gender, and that kind of led them to realize things about themselves, then they may, that excitement about starting a new relationship may have been more visible in the workplace, and that might have led to conversations and that may not have happened because you're online and things. Or equally, someone could have broken up with someone, or someone might have started transitioning or something, and they might have done that, and then they might be quite anxious about coming back to work because suddenly, you know, their identity and their life has changed, and actually they haven't kind of shared that online, and they've managed to kind of keep that quite private. So yeah, I think there could, for some people, it could be that it already feels like quite a big transition, I suppose, anyway, and it might feel depending on what's happening in your life, it might feel even more significant.
Oh, that's very true. Yeah. So unless anybody else had anything to add, I think we'll finish off the panel with some questions from the audience. So if you'd like to ask any questions, I don't think they raise their hands or not. Louise, will type them in the comment bar, or raise your hands, or just jump straight in.
Either really, it might be easier for the raise of hands just to like manage the microphones popping in and popping out. But yeah, so if anyone has any questions, I just want to say to all the panel, 10 out of 10 excellence. So just thank you. But it'd be really great to hear if you've got any questions, comments. It doesn't have to be like a deep question, but it's important for us to allow the audience members to like engage with the conversation.
This is where we need that music again, where we just wait.
I guess to fill the void, I'll add one in. Oh, okay. I'll go to Hannah's first, then I'll say mine. Do you have any advice, thoughts on how to tell a colleague that it's okay to ask me about my sexuality?
Ooh.
I can go. I'm a big fan of just kind of saying things quite bluntly. I think that removes a lot of the awkwardness from things. So I would just kind of say like, hey, I know that this has maybe come up, or it's been, I don't know, like pointed to explicitly. If you want to ask, like, open book, no judgment, you can be curious, ask me anything. And I think that tends to do the job, and it creates that it facilitates a really non-judgmental and safe space for that person to also unpack maybe any assumptions or prejudice that they might have, and they haven't just had a chance to work through them with someone else. So yeah, just be blunt, don't be awkward.
Yeah, I think that's a fab answer. I think that's the best way to go, isn't it? Just get on with it. Be like, yeah, move on. Did you want to ask your question, Louise?
Oh,
you just muted yourself, sorry.
I'll pass to Martin because he had his hand up.
Oh, sorry, well done.
Sorry, yeah. One comment and one question. First of all, I thought Laura's comments and others around language was really interesting. So I was thinking about when you did the introductions, a number of people used the word queer, and that's a word I would, as a straight person, I would never use. But I presume, I would assume it's a privilege of those who want to use it within their own community to use that. So it's completely natural within the community, but I would never use it myself. And if I heard a straight person using the word queer, I would probably assume they were being homophobic. So it's quite an interesting, just a comment on the language. My question was not for answering now, but I just wanted to say, if I didn't get the chance before the end, I'd really like to know how open, how non-judgmental, how comfortable is UWE as a workplace for people from the LGBT plus community, for them in which to work. So how well are we doing? I'm probably blind to a lot of that. So whatever routes, channels we use, I'm very keen to find out about that. And therefore, obviously, by implication, what more could I do? What more should we be doing as a university? So it's a genuine question, but it's not one I'm looking. I mean, if the panel have any comment on that, that would be great. But it's a question I'd like to leave with yourselves in the network, and also the whole of the audience as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that, Martin. I can partially answer that question. The main kind of way of measuring that is through our Stonewall Equality Index submission that we do, because that is a robust way of looking through kind of like a whole university approach on LGBT plus inclusion. And then the other thing for me, I can't not plug this, the importance of the LGBT plus staff network in terms of not just it running successfully, but people being engaged when there's activities and events that are happening similar to this. And then also the LGBT allies network that we are desperately trying to for it to be vibrant and active, and to really, exactly how all the panelists have shared today, just the importance of allies and the role that they play in advancing LGBT plus inclusion and standing side by side with our LGBT colleagues and students. So yeah. So, and then lastly, just a personal thank you to both Suzanne and Martin, just to highlight the importance of having LGBT plus role models and LGBT plus allies who are in senior positions within the university, because that gives a lot, it's role modeling behavior and also allowing people to be their full selves by seeing other people be themselves. I will pass back to Alun because we have more questions coming into the chat for answering. Thank you.
That's fine. Did you want to add something, Anna? I just see that your hand's up.
It's just one quick thought that I have around language and what Suzanne says about to be inclusive, like using gender neutral and inclusive language. I think English language is perfect for that, because it's non-gender language and you can be more inclusive. There are I'm native Spanish, and we are all gender, so everything is or masculine or feminine, and it's really hard so we invent a new word, but other people don't agree. Anyway, my conclusion is like that many languages that they are gender, so or is feminine or masculine, and it's harder to be more inclusive, even though like all we should try, but English language is really good for that. So everyone, we should be really inclusive.
Oh, thank you, Anna. We've had a question, a really good question from Joe. Considering Gen Z are considered the generation that is most active politically and socially, what do you see the positives that will come out of this, and any barriers you think we will need to overcome? Does anyone have any thoughts on this?
I think the activism, I mean, I'm wholeheartedly a millennial, but the activism that I've seen going forward and the groups that I've interacted with, it's been amazing to see the change and the differences that are occurring and the progress that we are making. Sometimes that can be small, but every bit of that is really, really important, and I think that's really crucial to hold on to. There are a lot of barriers being put in place without me getting too politically or socially in deep right now, because I know we don't have an awful lot of time, but I think it's just a case of, I've just seen with Gen Z especially, and those that are then following their example of this kind of freshness coming through, that there's so much resilience, and I think that's really, really important. And I think there's so much resilience with not just activism, but learning too. So that's really, really, really fantastic.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. Yeah, and the younger generation seem to be more in tune with themselves maybe than we were when we were younger. Like I've seen when I went to the last Pride I went to, you could see people like as young as maybe 12, 13 holding hands with their same-sex partners or whatever, and it was so nice to watch, but that never would have happened when I was at school or when we were younger. But it wasn't a done thing then. It was a while ago.
The last Bristol Pride that UWE marches as part of Bristol Pride, and one colleague brought along her daughter who's in secondary school and some of her friends, and that was their first experience of Pride, and they were sort of exploring their identities, and they were it was just lovely to see them being there with their mum as well. Like, even if we had, you know, gone to Pride, not that there was one near where I lived, but it certainly wouldn't have been something I would have done with my mum. and that just gives you so much hope, actually. So yeah, it was great.
No, it's lovely, isn't it?
If I could just say a comment on the politics one as well.
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. I think it's just important to remember that queer politics is not a new thing by any means, and we need to remember not to westernize it and whitewash it. So in identifying and challenging the systems that uphold queerphobia, transphobia, etc., we also need to challenge and be educated about the systems that have made it born in the first place. So the colonial system, capitalism, all of these kind of things where it criminalized and it vilified queerness and all of those kind of things in different cultures and different religions and countries. And remember that we are not like the trendsetter of the queer political movement, and making sure that we're not becoming the face of it as well, when there are many other people that also need to be uplifted in this conversation politically.
That's great, thank you much. As there's no more questions, I think it'd be safe to wrap this up. So I would like just to say a thank you again to all the panelists that have come today. Thank you for your time and your valued input, and obviously to Martin as well for coming from the executive, coming to chat today. And lastly, to thank you to Louise for organising all of this. It was obviously put a lot of work and effort in to get this all together and get us all chatting. And so like big thank you to everyone and everyone that attended as well today to come listen and ask questions. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone, and do keep in touch with both the UWE Bristol LGBT Staff Network, but also the Equality, Diversity, Inclusivity team for more kind of events and activities. But I do hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I will stop recording, and I will see you all again very soon, no doubt.
Brilliant. Thanks all. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.